Yes, the woman did become the downfall in the story. What are some other things?
The way the devil just barely twists truth.
True?
That when he said, "Who said that you was naked?"
Where did they get that? Why did they all of a sudden know that? They were always naked, right? That's good. They hid from God. They passed on the blame. Yeah. You like that? It's like the woman you put here with me, God, not only do they pass the blame on, but he passes it on to God. Have you guys ever done that? It's like, God, you did this to me, so it's really your fault.
We also talked about like curiosity. The woman saw the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye.
Right?
Also desirable for gaining wisdom.
Why do you need wisdom at that point? I mean, you have God, right? You can be like God. So what is the true deception in the whole story? We don't need God, right? Can you guys all agree on that? I mean, they had everything. They were in the garden, and it's really hard for us to imagine, but it was like this perfect world. But yet they needed something more. So when the serpent challenges them, he actually challenges them to be like God. You know, I've been reading Adam and Eve against Satan versus Satan, and it's actually a historical book that was written about 2,000 years ago. Some say it was supposed to be in the Bible. Some say it's just the gospel. But either way, it's really interesting. And because it's so old, I think it's kind of fascinating because I know that any of the people that wrote, in this word probably read that because it was like a famous story, the story of Adam and Eve, like from start to finish, where we only get glimpses of it in the actual Bible. And I read something the other day that I never considered. Because I think when we hear that story and we're young and we think of the serpent, we think of like a talking snake, right? Wouldn't you agree? Actually, if the story's right, that's not the shape he was in. He was a snake in the sense that like lots of people we know are snakes. But he was actually very handsome and he was still in the form of like a man. And so when he came, he was in that form. And so it makes it a little easier to understand how you could fall for it. See, we write off the story because it's so unbelievable. We are like, well, we would never be Adam and Eve because we would see the talking snake. But the fact is, it didn't come as a snake. There's a chance that it didn't become the snake till later on. So once later on when God, after he deems the fall of man and says that, cursed is the man who must work and toil in the earth with his hands, and goes on and gives the whole spiel. That's when the serpent became the form of the snake. Yeah. It was what now? Right. Could be a lot of things. What's important is we see that every day we're challenged to believe something that we don't want to or don't need to believe. And I think that that's where the deception comes in. I want to talk about 4 areas this morning. In the flesh. Okay, so we agree that it's because of the flesh that we can't make good decisions. It's because of the flesh that we turn away from God. It's because of the flesh that fill in the blank. So this morning I want to tell you about these 4 things. Write this down. It's the 4 areas of the flesh: deception, performance, hiddenness, and destruction. Deception, performance, hiddenness, and then destruction. You see, if Adam and Eve would have resisted the deception from the serpent, then they would not have broken God's commandment to not eat of that tree. So I think for ourselves, we have to look at, like, what is the thing that God is telling us not to do? What do you think in your own life that is? And it's probably different. It's different for me than it is for Matt. It's different for Christian than it is for Ricky. And we often just think of it as drugs and alcohol, right? But it's not. I think that the reality is that that's the deception that the enemy wants us to believe. That it's drugs or it's alcohol. Your issue is really with heroin. Your issue is really with alcohol. That's the deception. So don't fall for that and you're good. And the problem with that is that in the deception category of the flesh, that's true to some extent. Is it not? If you avoid heroin, then you're going to be good, right? If you do. Yes? If you avoid whatever it is that got you on your journey to end up here in the first place, then you would be good, right? Jason, if you avoid alcohol, you'd be good, right? Something leads you to drink. Yeah. So the deception is that we believe that all we have to do is stay away from this one thing, but then we never get to walk into the fullness of who God creates us to be. I look at it this way. When we accept a lie about who God is, and thus a lie about who we are, our perception of the whole world is clouded. So our deception being, okay, we first see God as this evil ruler. We first see God as this judgmental being that sits above us. We first see God as not existing. We first see God as not being enough for us. And that's where most of us in this category ended up. God wasn't enough to heal whatever it was that was broken in us that led us to, like Jason said, drink or use. Right? So we all started using for a reason. And what's ironic is almost none of us in this area did it because it was fun. You know, we may have thought that, but we were really trying to run from the abuse that we were taking at home from our parents, or we were trying to run from the abandonment that we felt from our parents at home, or whatever. Almost none of us started using in a good home. Very few of us in this room did, right? Or in this yard. So if the sun hits you and you need to move forward, you can. Because everybody's ducking down. TJ's got it down. He's just like, I'm just putting a hat on. So the deception is that, like, okay, I was physically abused by my family, so I don't believe God can heal that, so I start to drink to mask the pain. Does that make sense? You starting to follow where I'm going? So the first lie that we believe about God is that He isn't enough to sustain us. And then that lie, therefore, takes us through, like, the rest of our life till this moment. He's not enough to heal those things. But when we believe that, we believe this tainted vision of the world. Then we have this separation from God. And in the separation from God, we end up hungering for something that we can't fill. When Adam and Eve were in the garden and everything was perfect, and the serpent says, eat of that tree, they already had everything they needed. And so they believed, because the serpent said the tree, that there could be something more. The fact is, they were totally filled by God at that point. So for us, it's like when we separate from God, we don't even have that. We don't even have that feeling. So we hunger for something, and that's why we'll try everything in the world to fill that. That hunger that's inside of us is like, okay, so now I'm going to take enough drugs. I'm going to drink enough alcohol. Okay, now I'm clean and sober. I do meetings. I'm going to get the right job. I'm going to get the right girl. I'm going to make enough money. Every shiny object there is, we're going to try and fill that hole inside of us with those shiny objects. And does it work? Anyone? No, it doesn't. The next item is performance. What do you guys think performance is? Acting? What did you say, Joe? Acting on the deception. Very well put. Very well put. What do you think the problem with performance is? Think that it's yourself? Yeah. Anyone else? I'm sorry, speak up. Yeah. It's really hard to hear. There's an airplane going over. It's like it's dropping down, notes or whatever. Performance. The problem with performance is we end up performing in a way that tells people. Me and Justin had a long talk last night, and it's like, and we kind of touched on this. When we end up in performance, especially here, we can't ever admit weakness. See, performance and hiddenness kind of go together, because the performance is what begins the hiddenness. Okay, if we're performing in here and acting like we got our recovery together and acting like we got Jesus together, then what happens when we feel like we want to get high? You won't share it. You won't share it, right? We kind of get that, but we only think in this microcosm of ourselves here. We're like, oh yeah, sure, it makes sense here, but not really in the world. No, it makes all the sense in the world. We see it every day in Middle America where people just act like they have no problems, right? So the performance that you're creating about yourself creates this image that you then end up having to live out. Does that make sense? It's like, if I act like I have total confidence, I can never act like I'm weak. If I act like I know everything, then I can never admit that I don't. So we all know there's certain people that you cannot get them to say they don't know what they're doing. We talked about this the other day. It's like we were in devotional where guys they come in and they're like, yeah, I know how to do this, and they know full and well in about 2 hours we're going to ask them to do it, and it's going to see that they don't know how to do it. But they still won't say anything. You know what I mean? It's like, yes, I know how to lay tile, and next thing you know, they're putting the tile on the ground without the mud, and they're upside down. You're going to think I'm making this up, but I'm dead serious. I had a guy once, and it was within the last year, it may have even been one of you, that said he could lay sod.
Green side up.
And then he put the other side up.
Nice.
He goes, yeah, and he tried, and instead of admitting that he didn't know what he was doing, you know what he said? He goes, you water you water it really heavy, and the dirt sinks to the bottom, and that's how it gets the root system going. I go, dude, shut the hell up, man. That's not what you do. You put the green side up, man.
50-50 shot, and you blew it.
You had a 50-50 shot, and you blew it, and you're still like hanging on, like I'm not going to admit I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know if he ever did. It's like, man, it's your story. Tell it any way you want. Seriously. Or, I cannot tell you how many people I've asked to, do something that I sort of know, but I don't know a lot. So I'm just like, hey, do you know how to do this? Especially, with computers or, things like that. And then they get in there and you're like, okay, stop. You're making matters worse. This is not a good idea. That deception leads to this performance that we have to continue to live out. Problem with performance when it comes to spiritual matters. Let's look at it this way. Spiritual matters. Why do we even follow God in the first place? If we follow the logic that I'm trying to explain to you guys this morning, is that God, in a perfect world, fills all of our needs. God, in a perfect world, heals all of our wounds, our brokenness, right? If we perform in life and spirituality, we are acting as if what? God isn't real, isn't who He says He is, can't do the things that we are supposed to believe that He can. Correct? Because we're performing. So if I'm acting like I'm super spiritual, if I'm acting like I know the Bible, what I'm really saying is I don't actually believe God to tell me anything about himself. I don't actually believe God to speak through me. I believe I'll just do it on my own. And then, obviously, in other worldly ideas, you can get the point. But in just spiritual matters, when we do a performance, when we act spiritual, and I firmly believe that this is part of why, over the past few years, more leaders have relapsed than anybody else in the ministry. Not this past year, this group of leaders has been with us for almost a year now, which is awesome. The group before that, we saw like 12 leaders relapse in a year. And I believe this is why. Because they were performing. And the problem with performance is nothing real gets to you. See, we come to God and we have this relationship with God, and it's not for head knowledge. It's for healing inside of us. It's for filling inside that hole that needs to be filled, that every one of us is created with because of the fall. And so if God has to heal that inside of you, and you're performing, he can't do it. And so the problem with it is it's like this. It's like eating like a gourmet dinner and having all of the food stick in your teeth and not go to your stomach. You taste it, and it looks like you're eating a big gourmet dinner, but at the same time, at the end of it all, you're starving. Does that make sense? Is that picture good? Because that's what happens when you perform. If you act super spiritual and people want to say you're a man of God and want to pat you on the back and want to come around you, then you'll receive that reward here and now. People will think those things about you, but inside you, you will be wretched, pitiful, weak, and you will be hurting and getting weaker and weaker and weaker by the day until you fall. Because the performance leads to the hiddenness, which leads to what? The final thing, destruction. You look at the destruction. We believe that we have to believe this lie because we don't trust God. So we have to perform. That's our strategy for getting life. Our performance is how we get life. Because you guys all know, there's a certain amount of life that comes from people patting you on the back saying you're doing awesome. We hunger for that, don't we? It's not until just recently that we started giving out more encouragement around here. There was a long time that the theory was you don't pat anybody on the back because it just ends up feeding into this monster of insecurity that needs to continually be fed. So for the longest time, people weren't getting a compliment out of me or Ricky. So, and probably some of you right now are saying, I still haven't gotten one. So you're all doing awesome. That's my one for the year. Moving on. The point is, it's really strange because for me, I've worked with Brian Sanders at the Underground for almost 8 years now. I could probably count on my hand how many times he said I did a good job. Even when my talk, which a lot of people said I did good at the Underground, he was just just don't keep it too long. Because it's in reality, what should we be getting? Everything should be coming from God, not from each other. It's good, yes, of course, we don't go around not encouraging each other. But at a spiritual level, when you're really walking at a spiritual level, you're not running around patting each other on the back all the time. You're receiving from God in the way that you're supposed to, in the way that you were created to. And then the credit goes to God, because ultimately in a performance, subconsciously, the performance you give that people are saying is doing well. That's a cool looking helicopter. I feel like I'm back in Ybor. What? I feel like I'm back in Ybor, yeah. The performance definitely feeds into, giving you that a credit for it and making you feel. But on a subconscious level, and like I said it to Justin last night, I said, that you cheated. That's what it comes down to. It's have you ever cheated in a game and won, and it just doesn't feel the same as winning it outright? Right? I mean, River hates to lose, so he would cheat in everything as a little kid. So he'd make up the rules as he's going along. It's right? He's still denying it, right? He hates to lose. So, we all hate to lose. Anyways, but it's not the same as actually playing the game by the rules and winning on your own. And it's the same way with life. So if you want to cheat and tell people you're doing better than you are, it's great, and you can keep it up for a while, and eventually it's just going to wear thin, and you're going to fall. Let me tell you guys a little bit about why I kind of started studying these things, and it really came from last year for me. Now, most of you guys know that last year was a horrible year for me, that I kind of fell apart, and I really wanted to know why I fell apart. Why was it that after 9 years of ministry, all of a sudden I couldn't pray, and all of a sudden I was not hearing from God, and all of a sudden I didn't want to see any of you, and I didn't want to talk to anybody, and I didn't want to be in a meeting with anybody. And if you did get a meeting with me, it was a mistake, because I was probably going to blow up on you, and it was just what was happening, Obviously, I went to a counselor and found out I had ADD and was able to get that taken care of, and some other personal issues, and I was able to work through all that. But the lingering question to me was, why after 9 years? Why? Yeah, I get it, but I always had the ADD. I get it. I've always been impatient. I've always been all of those things. So why after 9 years did I come to this point where I wanted to get high, wanted to leave my wife, wanted to just take off? Why? And that's when I just discovered these 4 aspects of the flesh. Because after a while, and you get a certain amount of knowledge, after a while you've done a certain amount of, can you imagine how many devotionals I've done? If you think about it. It wasn't until recently that I had other people do it. Ricky had to sit through 4 or 5 years of me doing every single day. You run out of things to say, guys. You really do. 5 days a week, I used to have Bible study with the Initiative, then I had the Bible study with the Pink House, then I had Bible study with guys at the Underground. I mean, 3 Bible studies, 5 devotionals a week for 6 years straight. You just spiritually run out of anything possible to say to anyone. But you got to perform, right? Because every morning there's a group of guys that are going to come in, and I got to perform. I'm like the monkey at the circus. I got to come out and clap those cymbals. And so over time, I started just clapping those cymbals and not actually doing anything about it. Until I finally, the well inside of me ran dry, and I wanted to just get high. I wanted to take off. This right here, what I'm trying to share with you guys this morning, is huge. If you can understand what happens when you don't trust God for who He is, act like you do and put on a performance, begin to hide how you really feel, you will fall into destruction. Me and Justin had an awesome talk last night, and I know that some of the things that concerned him are some of the things that concern you guys. That you fear telling anybody that you're feeling weak. You fear telling anybody that you're struggling because you're afraid that they're going to judge you for it, or they're going to take away your privileges for it, or they're going to change how they look at you. And I get that, man. But we got to trust each other and know that that's not how it is. We got to trust each other enough to know that, man, that I know what I'm doing, and if you come to me and tell me what's really going on, I know God and we can work through this. Don't start hiding things here, because if you're hiding things here, you're never going to not hide things out there. And if you're not going to hide things out there, if you're going to hide things out there, we all know you're going to fall. The reality is, I almost fell last year because I put on a performance. You guys will fall if you put on a performance. You will. John Flowers fell because he put on a performance. John knows the Bible. Everybody knows that, right? If you don't, he does. I'll give him credit for that. Man, he knows more about it than I do by far. But the performance of telling people you know about Jesus, the performance of telling people you know about sobriety. How many people you guys know that have been in meetings and they're like the meeting guru, and then they fall and you're like, damn, how'd that happen? He just left the meeting and then fell. It's like, because it's a performance. You go, you show up, you clap your hands for the public, and you leave. But there's no spiritual fruit inside you. There's nothing inside you. Therefore, you're not getting filled by anything other than people patting you on the back. And eventually, that's just not enough, man. And that's where you want to be. You want to be to the point where I don't care if anybody pats me on the back. I know the way I'm living is right. I know what I'm doing for God is right. For my sobriety is right. That's good enough for me. Does that make sense? Cool. All right, guys, I'm going to end this session. I want you guys to spend a few minutes, spend about 5 minutes right now, writing down what areas you think you're performing in, what areas you think you might be hiding in, what areas you think, that you're maybe on the eve of destruction in. Spend about 5 or 10 minutes at it's 9:45. We're going to get back together at about 10, something like that. Everybody good? Any questions? We'll cover questions next time. All right, guys. We're going to try and move the next session inside. Yeah.
Clear.
Slipknot.
Andy, I don't know how we're going to do it on that paddleboard.
I think we got this. Unless we hook a shark or something. Then we're done.
You look anything bigger than like 5 pounds, it's still really bad.
It won't be that bad unless it's huge.
You can be the
Like
first guys to ever catch a Goliath grouper on a paddleboard.
Dude,
Come on, dude.
I'll try it.
It's not going to happen. Come on, man.
I'll try it.
River will go down there and wrestle the damn thing.
No, I won't.
Yeah,
Dude, we'd have to. It'd be like all luck. Because we'd have to drag
or you
it.
can just hang on to the grouper and let him tow you around.
It's probably. We would kind of have to do that for a little bit.
If it's big enough, it might try to eat you.
It might. Keep your feet on the
Where's
paddleboard.
River? Well, What happened was,
You ever heard a story about drowning a whale? Fish. Fish ate.
We have a plan. If we hook anything too big, he said he's gonna bite the line. If it gets too big.
man, if it gets too big to where I feel like it's gonna knock us off that paddleboard.
Oh, yeah.
Snip.
We're not bringing anything out there.
Rather do that, put the strap back in last night.
Oh, we're bringing a tape. Are we bringing two?
Oh, that's right, I gotta read your letter.
Oh, yeah, my dude.
There's sensors in the carpet in here.
Jack, I'll put on the spray stuff. Not the
Yeah.
rubbing stuff.
That's fine.
I don't know what sounds good. That's why I'm so burnt. I haven't put on any sunscreen.
I put it on 20.
I'm not that burnt. I'm burnt on my shoulders. That's it. And it hurts.
I woke up like probably a little bit down.
It's just better at the end.
Sleep on that cot.
Get on.
Yeah.
You can have some more after that. I'm looking for
Put on the rock star.
Never had this before. I kind of don't want to like poke the shark on the paddleboard.
Oh, the shark?
Yeah, like fish a shark.
I wouldn't want to do that.
Not on the paddleboard. But I'll catch another fish. I hope we catch a fish. At least.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want to catch a shark.
It's
I
like
was afraid to run into a shark when we were looking
we
at
were
that
afraid to
fish.
go up to a dead tarpon.
I know, because there's sharks around them.
There was no shark.
They were just waiting to take a bite out of it.
But they didn't.
They smell blood. One
It
drop.
doesn't bleed.
Since it had already bled out.
I actually don't know how that thing died. It was either it just died.
Somebody tried to
That's what I thought. Or it just died because like things died. Things died. It's like that's what happened.
It's like the size of that couch, or that love seat you're sitting on.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Easy, it's huge, man. I'm not
Probably bigger.
lengthwise, you know what I mean?
Yeah, not
It was
like-
that big around. We paddle boarded out to it, and he wanted to get really close, I was like, no.
I wanted to be in like touching range, but like
Yeah,
dead.
what's gonna like circle and try to eat it?
it was dead. But then
We
him
saw black tip
and Jason
right up on shore here. And then you wanna go out there on paddleboard, and like what if they, one line, I saw shark week, if they go into like feed frenzy, they start eating it, and then knock us off the paddleboard, and then River dies, and I have to come back and tell George, River wanted to go out, so I paddled him out, and he got bit by like 4 black tips.
and then he throws you in the water.
So that was all going through my mind, like, no, we're not going out here.
You got a little while. Let's have a
Stab him in the
yeah,
heel.
about 10, 15 minutes.
They have a little cover up. Gills, that's what Dawson says.
It's like punch your in.
You have a paddle up, beat it.
Oh yeah, we did have to go. Stick it in.
Yeah, but stay balanced.